Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com.
We can dance, everybody look at your hands. We can dance, everybody's taking the chance. Safe to dance, oh it's safe to dance. Yes, safe to dance.
Hello and welcome to episode 231 of the Situational Awareness Matters show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-stress, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SAMatters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming in time to avoid bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from my office in St. Paul, Minnesota, having just returned from doing programs in Grapevine, Texas, and Odessa, Texas. In today's feature segment, it's part one of a two-part interview with Franklin, New Hampshire Fire Chief Kevin LaChapelle, discussing a mayday event that occurred in a multifamily residential fire in Franklin. If you're new to the show, stick around after the feature segment to learn more about our mission, how you can attend and host an upcoming live event, and how to get connected with us on our social media. All right, let's jump into our feature segment, part one of my two-part interview with Fire Chief Kevin LaChapelle. Hey everyone, Rich Gassaway here from Situational Awareness Matters. Welcome to the show. And I am super excited to have with me today Kevin LaChapelle. Kevin is the chief of the Franklin Fire Department in New Hampshire, and his department in 2015 experienced a very significant near-miss event that they've learned a lot from, and they've actually even converted it into a program that they're now taking out and sharing with first responders about the lessons that they learned and the things that happened to them that day. So I'm really excited to learn from you today, Kevin. Thanks for being with me.
Thank you, Rich. I really appreciate it. It's such an honor to be a part of your program. It's my first time being a part of your program. And this type of thing to our department is extremely important. I've been on a mission my entire career to make sure, I wouldn't say my entire career, probably since the Worcester incident in Worcester, Massachusetts, to move forward with just learning from others and having others learn from our experiences. And lo and behold, this particular incident is one that there's so many lessons that come from it. So thanks for letting me be a part of your program.
Yeah, I'm so excited we're able to make it work out with your schedule as it is. Let's start by just telling us a little bit of your background, Kevin. When did you get started, and what have you done to get you up to where you're at today?
Well, thank you. This department that I'm with right now, Franklin, New Hampshire, it's actually where I started. I grew up as a young child. My grandfather was a fire chief. My dad was a fire captain on a volunteer fire department here in New Hampshire. And in my hometown, we had no junior fire program or no fire explorer program. And the Franklin Fire Department had a very robust explorer program that's been our farm team. And I joined as a fire explorer back in the mid 80s and really never looked back. Once I finished as a fire explorer, I went off into the Coast Guard and did search and rescue for 4 years. And my dream job, my dream was to work for the Franklin Fire Department. And when I got out of the Coast Guard in the mid 90s, there was not a whole lot of firefighter jobs in New Hampshire. I was actually a police officer for about 3 months. And that was a long 3 months for me. And it all worked out, and I actually got hired as a Franklin firefighter. The rest is history. I've been here since February 4th, 1996. I was a firefighter for 6 years. I was a shift captain for 8 years. I was a deputy fire chief for 3, and I've been the fire chief for 7 years now.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about Franklin and about the fire department.
The Franklin itself is actually, it's an old mill city. Franklin is the smallest city in New Hampshire. Our population is about 8,800 people. Since the mid 1800s, we've been that mill city, and now we're transitioning the mills into retail and living units. So like every other small rundown mill city in America, we're turning it into something new. The mills are now in their fourth generation of something else. And Franklin there's a lot of poverty in Franklin. There's a lot of welfare. Our homeless population is starting to grow. And on the flip side of that, we also have a new community that's growing where the mills are being redeveloped, and there's new folks that are moving into town. And this is the best feel that it's ever had here in Franklin. We're a combination fire department. We do have a call company. We have a very small call company at this point. We have about 5 active call firefighters. And previously, back when I started in 1996, we had about 35 call firefighters. And the transition into the full-time staff, really responding to 98% of our calls, it's a reality for us. There are 4 shifts in Franklin, and each shift has 3 permanently assigned members, and one of those members is the shift captain. The shift captain acts as like a battalion chief or a deputy fire chief may act in larger departments. The shift captain acts in the absence of the fire chief and the deputy when we're not here. They initially set up command, and they'll run those incidents until the deputy we arrive from home or from the station. Just recently, in the last month, we increased our daytime staffing to 4. So we were able to, we've partnered with some area communities, and we've got some private-public partnerships that have allowed us some revenue that allowed us to hire 2 additional firefighters, and they work just daytime hours. So during the daytime, our staff is up to 4, and then at night it's at 3.
In one station?
We are in one station. The city is 29 square miles, and the fire station is located right in the center of town, geographically in the center of our city. The city is separated by the Pemigewasset River, which forms the Merrimack River at the confluence. And the Merrimack River is a very large river that runs down into Massachusetts and out to the Atlantic Ocean. And that divides the city right in half. So we have the west side of the city, and then we have the east side of the city.
Okay. And then do you have mutual aid or automatic aid with neighboring departments?
We do, and that's where the success lies in our operation. We have a mutual aid system in central New Hampshire. It's called the Lakes Region Mutual Fire Aid, and there's 34 fire departments that belong to our mutual aid system. And within that mutual aid system, we have strong automatic aid. Specifically here in Franklin, we have the Tilton Northfield Fire Department that is to our east, and then we have the Sambrinton Fire Department that is to our north. We have always worked very closely with our mutual aid partners, and we have a robust run table system that allows us to have help, in a quick fashion. We work very closely with the Tilton Northfield Fire Department, and we run automatic aid to them, and they run automatic aid to us. And we'll talk about that throughout the presentation today, and how that has been very successful to the safety of our members, especially where our call company has dwindled down and the callback of our full-time personnel has decreased, and our run volume has doubled since I've been working here.
Wow. What talk me through the call volume? What kind of calls, do you do EMS or not? And then what your call volume is?
We do. EMS is really where the bulk of our work lies. 83% of our 2,000 calls, they're EMS. We run an advanced life support ambulance. There's a paramedic on every shift. And we have a local hospital, so we transport to our local hospital and a few outlying hospitals. We do have a second ambulance that runs second due by off-duty personnel, and that's right here in this one fire station. And our staff is all cross-trained, and they're hired as firefighters, and that 83% of the time they're performing EMS like the rest of the country, I guess.
Sure.
So our run volume, when I started here in 1996, we were doing 1,000 runs a year, and this year it's projected that we'll be over 2,000 runs.
Okay, so let's talk about the day of the near miss event, June 30, 2015. What kind of day was that? What was happening that day?
Well, it was generally speaking, for the Franklin Fire Department and our area, in our mutual aid partners, it was a busy day. It was just one of those days where our staff, they were responding on numerous med calls. We had motor vehicle crashes that day, and everyone was busy. It was a beautiful day outside. June 30th, as you can imagine, it was warm, and it was a sunny day. And on a sunny day in our city, the streets are, busy. We have sidewalks throughout the downtown area. And this particular incident is located in the downtown area. And there were folks on the street. The traffic was very busy at that time of day. It's a very congested, small, compact downtown area that folks are transient through our community or coming home from work. And traffic is fairly slow at that time of the day. And the call volume from the daytime had really bled over into the evening. And we were on 3 other incidents at the time of this particular incident that we're going to talk about today.
Now, Kevin, do you normally work days, or do you do shift work too?
I work days. I work 5 days a week. I'm a salaried employee, just as well as the deputy fire chief. And so we typically work Monday through Friday. We wear a fire pager, and we're called back into the firehouse at any given time. We take staff cars home, so we're very fluid. Our families understand that we could be coming back to work at any time of day.
Sure. And this call coming in at 6:30 at night, I'm guessing. Were you home already, or were you still at the station?
No, I was actually in my Class A uniform that night, and I had been asked by our local CERT team to be the guest speaker for a graduation ceremony. And it was at a local high school that's in the neighboring community. It was about 3 miles away. And I had been preparing for this talk for the better part of 2 months. And there were about 50 folks that were in attendance at this event. There was food, there was a cake, and there was going to be a joyous ceremony afterwards, and we were all going to eat and talk. And I was presenting at the time that the tone had actually gone off for this incident. And
did you stop the presentation to listen to your pager?
Well, I tried to do what every good presenter does, and try to ignore the initial noise of my pager. And I initially thought to myself, well, now everyone can hear it, and it's causing a ruckus. And in very, very short order, I could tell by the amount of tones that were going off on my pager that this was not the average run. First of all, we have an on-duty tone, and then we have an off-duty tone. So I actually had it on the off-duty tone. And when the off-duty tone went off, I knew it was going to be something fairly significant. And then it just started to, squawk. And I tried to half pay attention to my pager, but I knew I was committed to the public speaking event. And it really all started to unfold. The good news is that everyone that was in the room was either from emergency services or had great interest in everything that was coming out of my pager. And I realized today that I probably would have been better off to just stop speaking and let everyone listen.
Yeah. Well, okay. So talk me through. It really isn't what we're here to talk about, but talk me through this stage experience to the point where you realize you probably need to leave, and then how do you say that to the audience? And so what did you first hear that gave you? I mean, other than the off-duty tones. But what did you hear that gave you the indication that this was something that you were going to have to go to?
Well, initially it was toned as a building fire, and we were toned for the Franklin Fire Department along with Tilton Northfield automatic for one engine, respond to a building fire, and they gave the address. And this is a neighborhood that is high frequency, high risk, and that's part of that tone had caught my ear. And I tried to play it off real calm, cool, and collected, and just said, we'll just listen in. And they said, well, do you need to leave? And I said, listen, it's probably nothing. If it grows into anything, then we may have to, cut this short, and I'll need to leave. 30 reports of heavy smoke coming from the neighborhood, and they had multiple calls. And the captain, within 30 seconds, went to a second alarm. And I said, well, folks, I think this is probably the end of my presentation. I apologize. I tried to put a bow tie on the end of my presentation, and that's it. It ended there, and I left the room, and I watched them, kind of with like this. So this is the end. We're not going to talk anymore. So I left the building and jumped in my command car, and I responded to the fire.
So what's the first significant piece of radio traffic that you're hearing from the time you said, I got to go to, while you're going to your vehicle, getting in, responding? What are you hearing coming over the radio?
Well, I initially heard the shift captain give his report on scene of approaching the scene. We've got heavy smoke coming from a 2.5-story wood frame building, and he was giving orders during that command of for where Tilton Northfield's truck would report to. And you just had that feeling that you knew that the crew was going to work. There was no question that we were at that second alarm level where this is going to be one of those fires that it's all hands working, and you just knew. You had that feel by the shift captain's on scene report. And there was a lot of other chaos that was going on the radio that we probably should backtrack and talk about that for that day. This building fire was a third call for us. And the initial call that our crew was on was an ambulance call for a pretty severe cardiac problem. And the patient was transported to an outlying hospital outside the city. And the crew was just returning to Franklin, and the shift captain that was on duty that day was in the ambulance. He was not in a fire engine. He was not in the ladder, so he was already out of place. He wasn't in the station. He didn't have his gear on, and so they were in the ambulance. The second call that the crew, all off-duty personnel, were at was a motor vehicle crash, a low-speed motor vehicle crash, and they were cleaning up an oil spill. And as the story goes from the crew that was on the scene there, ears all perked up when the building fire came in. And actually, the captain who called the mayday, Captain Gary Hicks, he was at the motor vehicle crash, and he commandeered one of our call firefighters' private vehicles, and he jumped radio transmission that the fire was far more serious than the motor vehicle crash. So,
okay,
so if you close your eyes and think about it, it was just all chaos. It was, and you could tell on the radio when I was leaving my public speaking event, you could just tell that chaos was trying to get organized.
Yeah. So is the engine responding from the motor vehicle crash?
No, because we do not take an engine to a motor vehicle crash in Franklin. We have a heavy rescue unit that has a CAF system on it for fire suppression. So the fire engines and the ladder truck was still back here at the fire station while all of our personnel were on other calls.
So was there anybody back at the station to respond that equipment to the scene?
No, there was not.
Okay, so there's more of a story here as to how the apparatus responded and what was on the scene first. And oh my goodness, I can feel the mounting chaos here.
Oh yeah, it's it's every bad story that you read that the chaos just continued throughout the incident, and we were dealt the card of chaos right from the beginning. And the guys did a great job to try to reel it in. And the ambulance was actually the first arriving unit with one of the shift captains. It was the original shift captain who was on duty that was in the ambulance who actually arrived on scene to give the report. He was not giving his windshield report from a fire engine like we normally would do. He was giving it from an ambulance that had no water on it.
Okay. Is his turnout gear on the ambulance?
It is, but it's in a compartment that's kind of tucked away. So he's got to climb out of the ambulance. He's got to put his turnout gear on, and we can talk about that in a little bit when we get into talking about scene assessment of what he's wearing.
Okay, so the ambulance with a crew of 2 are first on the scene?
Yes, the ambulance with a crew of 2 was first on scene.
Okay, and then so his size up was working fire in a 2.5-story wood frame. And are you on the road then to the call by now?
I am. I'm initially just jumping on the road, and I'm headed to Franklin. It's about 3 miles away, and really just trying to absorb it all in, because you can tell that this is one of those incidents that's going to be labor intensive as far as incident command is concerned.
Okay, and what do you have at this time? What do you have responding to this call as far as departments and apparatus and personnel at this point?
We have 2 engines in Franklin that are set up as twins, and they're parked in the fire station, and in this particular case, waiting for off-duty personnel to come pick them up. We have a 93-foot tower truck that's sitting here in the fire station. Typically, the tower is operated by our call personnel. At this particular fire, we did have a call lieutenant that came and picked up the ladder, and the ladder ended up following the engine to the scene. And then we have off-duty personnel driving in their POVs to the scene. We have our mutual aid partner, our automatic aid engine coming from Tilton Northfield. They're on the road. And at this point, we're basically all on the road and listening when the first arriving ambulance with that shift captain, Captain Goldthwait, arrives and gets his report.
Okay. Keep talking me through the timeline here.
So as the timeline goes, the incident started to unfold. The captain arrives, he gives his initial report, and he starts to realize that not all occupants are accounted for in the building. This is a very chaotic neighborhood. It quickly mounts to about 100 to 150 residents standing on the lawns around the building. It was you could tell by the looks on the neighbors' faces when you arrived that they were starting to move toward the house from all over the neighborhood. And it's on a very steep section of the city. It's probably our steepest hill in the city. I like to refer to Franklin as to our hills are like a mini San Francisco. In this particular neighborhood, it's a very steep grade. It's difficult to park vehicles in position. The homes are probably 50 feet between them or less. The house itself is an old New Englander. It's an old mill home. It was converted from a single-family mill home to a multi-family. In this particular case, it was a 3-unit New Englander. So it was cut up. The part of the apartment was in a barn. It had a very long stairway, about 20 plus steps that went up into the residence. It wasn't the normal 13 steps to get to the second floor. So it's an intimidating building. It's chopped up, and you just know that when you arrive at these New Englanders here in Franklin that they're multi-occupancy. The owner doesn't live on site. The families are children, parents, grandparents, sometimes great-grandparents that live in these units. So when you arrived, you kind of had that feel of, we still didn't have all the occupants accounted for at that point. And I could hear all that on the radio as I was driving in. And you could tell that the tensions were mounting. And then driving in, you could hear the voices escalating, especially Captain Goldthwait. I could close my eyes and tell that he was doing his 360. And as he was doing his walk around in his 360, he was assessing the building and reporting that back to the crews. And that was his transmission of, hey guys, conditions are changing. We need to start backing crews out of the building. And I could hear that on the radio on my drive in. And you could tell on the radio conditions were changing.
So hold on. There are crews in the building? I thought the only one that was there was the med unit.
Yeah, well, at that point, I think we're probably, I'm a little bit ahead of myself and talking about him walking around the building and crews being in the building. The engine arrives on scene with a driver only after the med unit. So, I don't know what the lag time was on the response between the ambulance arriving and the engine arriving, but the engine arrives driver only, and Captain Hicks, who normally when he's on shift would be the incident commander. In this particular case, he already had his turnout gear on because he was wearing it at the motor vehicle crash. So he goes to the engine and he grabs his SCBA. There's another off-duty firefighter that's there. One is a call firefighter, one is a full-time firefighter, and they jump in. They make a crew of 3. They're the initial attack crew. So as they're donning their gear, that's when Captain Goldthwait is starting to do his walk around. So there was a very brief face-to-face contact between Captain Hicks and Captain Goldthwait of, hey, the fire is up there on Division 2. Use this stairway. And that's when crews just started to do their work. So hopefully that paints a better picture of how we can, see how they arrived on scene.
Yeah, and he's not getting any confirmation from occupants that everyone's out.
No, there was a lot of yelling and screaming by bystanders. There was a bystander who had actually gone in at the initial stages of the fire and removed a box that was on fire. And he was very animated and yelling at folks on the scene about, what he had done and where the fire was. And there was really no question where the fire in the building was, based on what the occupants were telling us and by reading the smoke. And you could see really what unit it was coming from.
Mm-hmm. Okay, keep going on the timeline.
So as the 360 started to happen, the crews started to enter the building up over that stairway. There was a lot of direction given to the occupants that were outside of, hey, you need to back up. And we were able to remove, I shouldn't say they, because I was not on scene yet. I was still listening on the radio. And they were trying to remove the occupants from this narrow driveway. And at that time, by the time the first crew went up over the stairway, they were able to confirm that there were no occupants that were in that fire apartment. Down on Division 1, where there was much less smoke and no fire visible at all, that's where the Mutual Aid Company was directed to Division 1 to do a primary search of that area to make sure there were no residents there. So at that point, while the Franklin crew of Captain Hicks, firefighter Randy Danforth, and firefighter Steve DeRocher went up over that stairway, and they encountered, that heavy smoke and fire in that apartment on Division 2. The Tilton Northfield crew was just starting to enter Division 1, and they were starting to open doors. When Tilton Northfield opened up those doors down on Division 1 and that initial attack crew of the Franklin guys up on Division 2, we started to open up the building. And on the timeline, we put together that's when Captain Goldthwait started to see the conditions change in the building. Is that we were opening the building up, and he could see the smoke condition really started to rapidly change. And in our presentation on the PowerPoint, there's a video, and it is very clear that you can see that the smoke condition change. And we make that a very profound moment in this presentation of that's when the conditions really changed.
Would that video be something that I could get a copy of and embed into the podcast? I'd turn the screen over and have you play it, but the internet connection is still just a little choppy. It's good on your side, and the problem's on on my side. And
Yeah, absolutely. It's a public link. It's actually the video is on YouTube.
Perfect.
And what I can do, Rich, is I'll take that link and I'll send you that link, just as the link, and that's it.
Okay. So
no.
You can speak as though the viewers are actually had the chance to watch the video, because at about this point of the interview, I will just go ahead and insert the video, play the video, and then you can speak to the conditions and such as you know they are on the video.
Sure. At what point, so in the presentation, are you going to work from the slides, or am I just strictly using those as notes?
I think you're just going to strictly use those.
Okay.
Unless you have things in the slides you want the viewers to see.
I don't think they really need to see it, but what I'd like to talk about for a minute at the beginning of the presentation is what the name of this presentation is, and then there's two key slides that I want to talk about. It's trust and vulnerability.
Please.
And all of those things we're at the point in the presentation right now where those two crews are working. This is where trust and vulnerability comes in and is paramount in the presentation. So if you like, I'll talk to those 2 or 3 slides, and then I'll jump right into reading the smoke and what it looked like. And reading that smoke in that video, you actually see my command car drive down the road, and I arrive on scene.
Okay.
So I can put all that together for you if you want.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the precursor. Do you want to speak to that on the trust?
Sure. So, Rich, with this presentation, the name specifically, the Mayday, all teaches us about trust, vulnerability, and growth. And that's our opening slide. And those 3 things, trust, vulnerability, and growth, is where we really think that we've learned the most from. We've defined trust, as a firm belief that reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something. And when we really start to think about the trust that we have for each other in the fire service, in this particular case, at this incident, you have Captain Hicks, who's entering the building with his crew. He's trusting that Captain Goldthwait is going to do his 360 and read the building, read the smoke, read the fire. And we're trusting that all of our crews are going to work hard and they're just going to make it happen. Vulnerability in this particular presentation is the most difficult word that we have struggled with, because, listen, in the fire service, we know that weakness we don't want weakness to be a word in our vocabulary. And that is the overarching lesson that we have learned in all of this since 2015, is that, listen, we're all vulnerable. It doesn't mean that we're weak. It means that we have a sense of vulnerability. It's the state or quality of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. And when we go into a building and we're crawling down a dark, smoky hallway, there's total vulnerability there. There's a lot of things that can affect us, and we can be harmed. Doesn't mean that we're weak. And that was one of the key things that came out of this emotionally. There's a lot of healing that has happened since this incident. And we now understand the term vulnerability so much more. And our trust has grown based on our skill level. We were able to watch. I watched it as I drove down that one-way street, and I saw the fire in front of my command car, that the smoke was building, and Captain Goldthwait's doing his walk around, and he's giving his radio transmission into that crew. Hey, conditions are changing. You need to back out of the building. We're trusting that he can see it, and we need to trust his word, and we need to back out. And I can remember throughout my career that when someone called and said, you need to get off the roof, you need to back out of the building. No, just 5 more minutes, 1 more minute. I've got 1,000 pounds of air left. Let me just keep going. And we have grown to the point where we trust our officers so much, and so much since this incident, that when he tells me to leave the building, that means I need to leave the building, because he sees something that I don't.
Keep going. I want to hear how we built up to the Mayday condition here.
So I'll start by saying that, so I'm responding in, and I'm about a half a mile out from the incident, and I hear there's a mayday on the fire ground. There's a mayday on the fire ground. Captain Hicks is calling a mayday. I never heard the radio transmission of a mayday on my mobile unit in the command car. He was calling it from his portable radio, and it echoed in my head that Captain Hicks was calling a mayday. And this is the part in me as a fire chief. The emotion really took over for I don't want to say a split second. It was seconds, but I could physically feel my body heat up and feel that stress of here's the day. Here's a fire chief's worst nightmare. We've got a mayday at this incident. I had been listening. I knew it was a building fire. It was confirmed. Here it is. And I knew from the radio transmission that it was Captain Hicks. I heard Captain Goldthwait call out to the deputy fire chief and say, hey, Captain Hicks is calling a mayday. They're on Division 2. And the story behind the relationship between myself and Captain Hicks is we came into the fire service together. We were friends way before we were firefighters together. And, our families have hung out together. I can draw the layout of his home. I can tell you his dog's names. I can tell you his wedding anniversary. And he can probably do the same. And so that emotion of my friend, my captain, one of my guys was totally consuming my brain. And I knew I had to pull it together. I had about a half a mile to do that. It became a quick half mile after I heard the mayday. And as I drove down into the scene, down a one-way street, and I could see the building in front of me. It was in my sights. I was squared off with the building. I heard Captain Goldthwait say that they've made it out of the building. So I knew before I exited my command car that the crew had made it out of the building. And that was about a minute plus time period before the mayday was cleared. So took a big deep breath before I climbed out of the command car, and I did not assume command until I did a face-to-face with the other guys on the scene. I was still wearing my Class A pants, my Corfram shiny shoes, and the only thing I was missing was the traditional bell cap to manage a fire scene. So once I made face-to-face contact with the deputy fire chief and Captain Goldthwait, we agreed that Deputy Gooderl would take command and Captain Goldthwait would keep operations. We knew the crew was out of the building, and we started to operate master stream devices at that point, just to try to get a grip on the incident.
Let me ask you a question. Captain Goldthwait was doing his 360. He said the conditions are changing and you need to get out. And then sometime subsequent to that, there was the mayday. How much time was there between the conditions are changing, you need to get out, and the mayday being called? Estimate for me the span of time between those two transmissions.
It was about 30 seconds.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Was the crew leaving?
The crew was not leaving. Captain Goldthwait had actually picked up from reading the smoke that the volume, the density, the color of the smoke, everything was rapidly changing. And you can see that in our video that showed with the presentation, that it is very clear of what Captain Goldthwait was seeing. From the video, you can see from a distance, from our cell phone videographer, you can see what's happening. But Captain Goldthwait had a front row seat as he was walking around this building. And we had full access on the 360. And as he made that transmission into the interior crew, there was no transmission back of a confirmation of, yeah, we're on our way out. The next radio transmission made was Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. And I'll send you that, Rich. I have the Mayday call. I have the audio.
Yeah, I'd love to embed that to let people hear that. So what did he say during the Mayday? What was the purpose of the Mayday? Were they overrun by the heat? Did they get disoriented? What caused the Mayday?
The cause of the Mayday was they were separated. And there was really minimal concern when they first entered the doorway into the apartment. from that top landing of that long stairway. So the third firefighter on the crew, Steve DeRocher, was actually still out on the landing and was not even in a smoky condition. He could see that smoke was banked down to the floor. But the nozzleman was firefighter Randy Danforth, and he was inside the building. We estimate that he was about 5 feet inside the door, and he was starting to find his way. They could see the fire on their left-hand side, and firefighter Danforth actually opened up the nozzle and started to play water onto what he believed was a doorway into the fire room. And later on, we found out that that was actually a pantry that had visible fire that had burned through the back of the pantry. And when they started to put water on the fire, that was at the exact same time that the fire conditions had changed, the smoke and the heat. As Captain Hicks explained, it pushed them to the floor. He could really start to feel the heat, and it was pushing them down. And when he made a verbal yell out to his crew, he yelled, "Randy, Randy," and Randy never answered. And the way that Randy, firefighter Danforth, explains it is it was extremely loud. They could hear the fire. They could just hear fire noise inside that apartment. And both of them report that they were pushed to the floor by the heat and the smoke. Now, Captain Hicks reports that his initial thought was, I can't find my crew. I know I'm okay other than the heat and smoke. I know I'm okay, but I've lost my crew. So we have trained extensively, and that's really what one of the turning points in this presentation that we have is for since 1999, our department has embraced training because of the Worcester tragedy and with the Worcester Six, the 6 guys that died in the Worcester cold storage fire. As soon as that first symposium and training seminar happened in Worcester, our guys jumped on that and realized that we do not want that to happen in Franklin. So Captain Hicks has on his mind, here's where all my training comes into play. The other thing that we've done is our entire department, all of our full-time members and most of our call company has embraced the firefighter safety and survival program. And that fireground safety program put on by the International Association of Firefighters, I truly do believe one of the things that saved our guys on June 30th, 2015. Captain Hicks never even hesitated to call his mayday. Previous to June 30th, 2015, there was a lot of hesitation from our guys of, I don't want to be the first one to call a mayday. And Captain Hicks really broke that seal when he called the mayday. And he says he didn't hesitate. He was separated from his crew. The conditions were changing. And the other 2 guys on the crew, Randy Danforth, he knew that it was bad, but he didn't realize it was a mayday situation. And firefighter Steve DeRocher, he heard the mayday on his portable radio, but didn't even reach out and hit the boot of firefighter Danforth and made physical command. He made physical contact with firefighter Danforth. And that's when he knew he was reconnected with his crew. And just remember, this is all happening in less than a minute. They're reconnecting at the top of that stairway at the beginning, the opening of the door, and then they made it outside. And they made it out on their own. There was no RIT crew that went in and pulled them out of the building. There was a secondary crew that was forming out in the driveway. And from a helmet cam video, we can hear firefighter Brad Kay saying, "Hey, he just called a mayday. Let's go. It's game time. Let's get in there. Let's go get these guys." But they were actually never able to get up the stairway because Captain Hicks's crew was able to make it out before they got up the stairway.
Okay. And then you're coming onto the scene.
Yes. So I made it on scene. I did a face-to-face with Deputy Gooderl, who is now command. I made a face-to-face with Captain Goldthwait, and I asked, "Hey, what do you need?" And they said, "We have incident command taken care of. We need hard water." There was still no hard water that was made from the hydrant to the attack engine. So in my Class A uniform, I jumped in the second due engine that was parked on the side of the road, and I laid a 4-inch supply line down to the hydrant. And as I arrived at the hydrant laying the line, along was walking up one of the sidewalks, was one of our call firefighters. And I immediately said, hey, you're going to have to take this over so I can get back up to the scene. And so I was separated away from the scene for a little bit while I laid that 4-inch line. And I knew in my mind the crew was out of the building, and that there was no rescue operation at that point. But I still had on my mind, I wonder if they're hurt. And I walked back up over this steep hill, and I could see Captain Hicks and his crew doffing their gear on the side of a stone wall next to the home. And I instantly went over and just made eye contact with all three of them and said, hey, are you guys okay? And they said, yes, we're okay. We just need some time. So they were already drinking water. They were able to pull themselves back together. And I was trying to assess their body language and the way they were speaking to me. Are they really okay? Physically, I knew they were okay. There was no obvious burns. They were exhausted. They had that look. It looked like they climbed out of a swimming pool. They were drenched, I think, mostly from sweat because their gear was off, and they were toasted. So I was able to talk with Captain Hicks one-on-one and said, hey, Gary, how are you really doing? And he said, I'm good. I'm good. He said, I want to get back to work. And I had to really quickly assess the fact that, am I ready to let this guy who just called a mayday and who's exhausted get back to work? Or do we need to do some mental first aid here? And I was pretty comfortable from our interactions throughout the last 25 years that I knew that's what he needed. He needed to be physically busy for a little bit and get back in there. So once they hydrated and they were able to pull themselves back together, we allowed them to go back into the building once the smoke and fire had cleared. And we were under control at that point, which was probably, let's put a time frame to it, 30 minutes later. And we were able to put Captain Hicks and his crew back in the building to try to build a comfort level. They just got beat up pretty bad, and again, worried about the mental fitness of it.
When they called the mayday, and I might have something in the timeline messed up, but I was thinking that there was a mutual aid department on Division 1 as well. Was I accurate with that?
Yes, no, you're exactly right. And we haven't talked about that yet, Rich, is the fact that mutual aid company was down on Division 1. They never even heard the mayday call. When we did our after action review here at the firehouse, that crew of 3 from Tilton Northfield looked at each other initially and said, mayday. We didn't even realize it was that bad of a situation. And so as we talked about the severity of the mayday, they had no smoke condition on that Division 1. So they didn't realize that maybe they could have been utilized or something to that effect.
And what do you attribute them not hearing the mayday? Were they on different frequencies, or what? Why didn't they hear it?
No, they were on our fireground channel. We have a very strong fireground channel system, and our dispatch center gives us the operational channel. And every time a unit signs on responding, they give the operating channel to that company. So there was really no issue there. I think it was the fact that Captain Hicks, when he called his mayday, he was on his portable radio in battleground conditions, and it was very muffled. And we feel very fortunate that Captain Goldthwait and Deputy Gooderl were able to hear that, even on their portable radios. So there was a lot of folks on the fireground that never even heard the mayday. Once we were able to re-enter the building, at that point, as I said, the smoke and the fire had cleared. There were no civilian casualties. There was no fire service casualties at all. We had, done a quick assessment of Captain Hicks and his crew. They were never brought to the ambulance. They were never assessed by a medical crew at all. We felt comfortable with them at re-entering the building, and everything seemed to be good. The tension on the fireground really started to minimize. Outside of the building at this point, all of our second alarm companies were on scene. I think it's important for us to note that we have a RIT crew that's assigned to every one of our second alarm building fires. The important thing with that is it's 13 miles away. Okay. So we've talked about this so many times since June 30th, 2015, that, it's nice to have a RIT crew, but it's more important to have our initial crews trained how to get themselves out of an emergency situation. And we've always trained on that. And this really makes it more profound that the training on the front side is really important. And it's important for us to have a RIT crew, but they're 13 miles away, and when they arrived, they stood in the driveway. The bad stuff was already over by the time the RIT crew was there. So we used other mutual aid companies, and the fire was under control in very short order in less than 1 hour. And then it was checking for extension, and there was some overhaul. At that point, Captain Hicks and I had a personal conversation about, have you notified your family yet that you were involved in this mayday? And he said, no, I haven't. I remember him. His voice is in my head still. Chief, can we go up to the fire room, just you and I? I want to explain this to you. And we went up to Division 2. We went to the fire room, and you have those pictures in the presentation that we've provided. And it's a fire room that didn't really have an extensive amount of fire where the heat smoke pushed them to the floor. And Captain Hicks, Gary, and I, we stood there in that kitchen, and he pointed out to me every detail of how they entered the room. And it was a kitchen, how they entered the kitchen. And he explained it detailed. And I had another conversation with him about, listen, have you called your family yet? And he said, no, I haven't. And I took my cell phone out of my pocket, and I handed it to him. And I said, you need to call Nancy. You need to call your wife. And I apologize for any emotions that might come out in this presentation, but this is the part for me that really struck me, that here I am, I'm having a conversation with my friend, Gary Hicks. And we're talking about calling his wife and telling her that he's okay. He's been involved in a mayday and he's alive. I did not want her to read that on Facebook. I didn't want her to get a text message. I wanted her to hear it from his voice. So he made that phone call. I don't know what the phone call was about, other than the fact that I'm okay. He handed me back my phone, and we went on and we did our thing. So that was the peak of the emotions at the Mayday incident, I'll tell you, because that, and I think about it every time we present, is that could have been a much different situation. It's it warms my heart to think that he made a phone call that I'm okay, instead of me making a drive to their house to tell his wife, Nancy, that he wasn't going to make it home.
Yeah. Now, are you married, Kevin?
I am.
Did you call your wife and say, we had a mayday, but everybody's okay?
I did once I got back to the fire station. Our families all kind of know that we're at incidents. Most of our families either listen on Broadcastify, or they just know that we're out. If our pages are left at home, they're listening. So, at that point, my family didn't even know that I was at a building fire, because I was at a previous engagement. So, it's that time of the evening where, I have kids at home. So, it's chaos time at home. It's 6:30 at night. There's dinner. There's all the sports functions. There's homework. So until I called my wife and told her that, we had a fire and there was a mayday and everybody's okay, she said, well, okay, that's good. And, the rest of the details were given at a later time. So.
All right. So the fire's out and y'all come back to the station. What's the conversation like?
Yeah, it kind of had a weird vibe.
Thank you to my guest, Fire Chief Kevin LaChapelle, for participating in this interview. Remember, this is part one of a two-part interview, so be sure to tune in next week for the second part and the important lessons learned from this Mayday event. Since 2007, SAMatters instructors have helped more than 1,200 organizations and over 65,000 individuals improve high-risk decision-making, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, utility workers, medical professionals, highway workers, aviation workers, oil refinery operators, and more. If you work in a high-risk, high-consequence decision-making environment, then I'm here to help improve your situational awareness and your survival. And I want to help you accomplish the most important goal of all, and that's to go home to the ones who love you. I would like to take a moment to honor and thank the companies, organizations, and agencies and departments that have hosted recent Situational Awareness Matters training for their team members. Fire Rescue International in Dallas, Texas. Northwest Fire District in Houston, Texas. Missouri City Fire Department in Missouri City, Texas. The Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard in Honolulu, Hawaii. Eagle Materials Corporation in Grapevine, Texas, and the Odessa Fire Department in Odessa, Texas. By the time this episode airs, I will have completed situational awareness programs for the Columbia Shuswap Regional District in Salmon Arm, British Columbia, and I will be halfway through my week-long work with the Port Smith Naval Shipyard in Kittery, Maine. If you're interested in attending one of the upcoming programs, here's where we'll be. September 29th at the Badger Firefighters Association seminar in West Bend, Wisconsin. October 12th, the Minnesota Fire Chiefs Association Conference in St. Paul, Minnesota. October 13 and 14, the Boggs Run Fire Department in Benwood, West Virginia. October 17, the Association of Canadian Ergonomists Conference in Sudbury, Ontario. October 19th, the Loudoun County Fire Officers Seminar in Loudoun County, Virginia. October 28th, the Clearwater Regional Fire Service in Alberta, Canada. And November 3 and 4, the Anderson County Fire Department just outside of Greensboro, North Carolina. To see the locations of all the upcoming Situational Awareness Matters tour stops, head over to the SAMatters.com website and click on the blue box on the right side of the homepage labeled Live Training Dates. If you are interested in hosting a program, just click on the Contact Us tab on the top of the SA Matters homepage, and I'll give you a call. If you want to become part of the SA Matters community of learners, there's a couple of ways you can do that. Check the show notes on how to get connected with us through our newsletter membership, podcast subscription, YouTube subscriber, and followers on our social media channels of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. There we share ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 231 of the SA Matters show is complete. Thank you again to my guest, Fire Chief Kevin LaChapelle, for sharing the story of your department's Mayday and the lessons learned from it. Thank you to our awesome sponsors, Midwest Fire and Chief Miller. Thank you to the companies, agencies, and organizations that have hosted Situational Awareness Matters training programs. Thank you to all the organizations that have hosted the live, virtual, internet-based training programs. And thank you to the more than 2,000 students and graduates of the highly acclaimed Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. And most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit SAMatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.